This planet's empty, I see no signs of life. Please don't tell me that the human race did not survive. There are no people in the future. There are no people. There are no people in the future. No people at all. There are no people in the future. Where did all my people go? There are no people in the future. Let me try my people call. Where are all my people? Where are all my people? I guess I'll fly away now.
Hey, everybody. Welcome. Yes. We are at the end of March. It is Friday, March 31st, 2023. Welcome to Raging Chicken's Friday Politics Roundup. This is Kevin Mahoney, creator and founder of Raging Chicken. Each week we break down the good, the bad, and the ugly in state and national politics. You can help support this show by becoming a patron for as little as $5 a month. Head on over to patreon.com/rcpress for all the details. $5 a month. It's like a good beer once a month, right? Except you're investing in independent media, right? Pretty cool, right? Patreon.com/rcpress. You can also help out the show by heading over to our YouTube channel if you're not there already. Smash that subscribe button, like the stream for this show, and hit that notification bell so you know every time that we go live. And if you're one of our awesome podcast listeners, make sure to leave us a 5-star review on whatever platform you listen on, and leave a comment to let folks know why you like the show. Little things like this help other people find the show and expand our audience. Yes, we are pushing toward that 300 subscriber mark on YouTube, which is pretty awesome. And we're pushing up to our 400th show. 400th podcast show. Pretty crazy. And hey, everybody, you cannot let Paul Martino and his oligarch friends buy our schools and push extremist politics in our community. We're going to talk a little bit about this in today's show. Raging Chicken has teamed up with Levelfield to launch a truly community-rooted PAC to invest in organizing, supporting local and statewide progressive candidates, and unmasking the toxic organizations injecting our communities with right-wing extremism. We're putting small dollar donations to work to beat back the power of big money. You can get more information and drop your donation at ragingchicken.levelfield.net. On today's show, Donald Trump. Yes, everybody, I know your news feeds are already filled with it already. Donald Trump was indicted yesterday for misuse of campaign funds to pay hush money to porn star Stromy Daniels. Yes, he is the first former U.S. president to ever be charged with the crime. Now, Trump's indictment comes less than a week after he launched his presidential campaign with a large rally and speech in Waco, Texas. Now, Waco, Texas, that was the site of the 1993 raid of the militant religious Branch Davidian compound that led to the deaths of nearly 80 people. Waco, ever since then, Waco has been a rallying cry for white supremacists and the extreme right. We're going to talk about that as a kind of choice, and we're going to talk about a little book I'm reading right now, too, as well, which is kind of like eerily important right now. We also saw that 38 migrants, now there's also some reports that still showing 39, but the most recent stuff I could find said 38. But 38 migrants were killed and 27 seriously injured in the fire at a Mexican detention center in Ciudad Juarez. It's in Mexico. The continued unjust and cruel immigration policies in the U.S., the Remain in Mexico policy, for example, helped create the condition for these deaths. And when we get to this, we're going to hear what Will Bunch had to say about this, because Will Bunch, because, as usual, he's been right on the mark. And according to a new report from the Kaiser Family Foundation, up to 15 million people are now at risk of losing health insurance as COVID-era rules that expand Medicaid and CHIP benefits are rolled back. Yep, everyone just stepping back, passing the buck. Meanwhile, people are going to get kicked off their health insurance. And a new study in the journal Nature projects that deep water currents around Antarctica could slow by 40% by 2050 if the current trajectory of climate change is not dramatically altered. A disrupted current could dramatically affect the climate, the flow of fresh water and oxygen, and the circulation of nutrients that are necessary to sustain marine life. Not just around Antarctica, but throughout the oceans. A some first graders in Waukesha, Wisconsin won't be singing Rainbow Land by Miley Cyrus and Dolly Parton. Now, they were supposed to sing a song which is about acceptance, coming together, and loving one another at their spring concert. How awesome is that? Why was it canceled? Well, you guessed it. School board administrators concluded the song violated the district's new controversial issues in the classroom policy initiated by a new right-wing dominated school board. Sound familiar? Yes, this is a national playbook. This is what we've been talking about forever. This is not just Bucks County. This is not just down the street from you. This is not just your local school. This is a national coordinated effort. This is nuts. And this week's horrific mass shooting in Nashville is, of course, being used by right-wing politicians and pundits to stoke anti-trans hate. Yep, but it's a white kid, white straight kid, white supremacist straight kid that heads into a school and shoots everybody up. Oh no, they're just like, we gotta find we gotta culprit, and we gotta find the health, mental health issues and all this other stuff. No. It's not kind of like anti-white hate. We don't get anti-white hate then, do we? No. But in this case, because it is apparent that apparently, according to reporting, according to information that we're seeing, according to what the police said, this is a trans man who carried out this shooting at a Christian school in Nashville. So the right, of course, no consistency whatsoever, because it's never been about consistency about them. It's been about hate and power, and it's about it. Anyways, a little closer to home today, new reporting by Maddie Hanna in the Philadelphia Inquirer shows that Paul Martino's PAC, the Back to School USA PAC, is gearing up for the culture war in the next round of elections. The PAC's website says it will be, quote, taking the fight directly to the liberal teachers unions, special interest groups that are responsible for indoctrinating our children. Yes, indeed. The Back to School USA PAC is planning on holding, this is wonderful, this is just like, is planning on holding an April 7th fundraiser at Mar-a-Lago with the right-wing founder of Project Veritas, James O'Keefe. There you have it. And newly elected Representative Summer Lee is wasting no time in making her voice heard. Summer Lee is a co-sponsor of the newly introduced assault weapons ban of 2023. She took to the House floor this week and tore it up. Yep, she's not sitting waiting her turn. Nope, get right to business. Way to go, Summer. And PA Senators Bob Casey and John Fetterman and Ohio Senator Sherrod Brown introduced a Railway Accountability Act this week, which will help prevent the kind of disasters that we witness in East Palestine, Ohio. Now, is it everything that needs to happen? No, but it is. It's building on a Railway Safety Act that was already passed, but putting in some teeth. A coalition of more than 24 environmental, faith, and business and healthcare groups sent a letter to Governor Josh Shapiro this week, urging him to keep Pennsylvania's commitment to the regional greenhouse gas initiative as part of Shapiro's stated commitment to getting the PA to net zero emissions by 2050. That's that coalition of states. I remember for the longest time, Pennsylvania, Governor Wolf was reluctant to have Pennsylvania join the other states around us in basically saying, hey, let's work together to bring down greenhouse gas emissions. And that was the reason why they started doing that, is in the face of a lack of federal action. When everybody knows, right? Everybody knows that we're facing a climate crisis, so we got to do this. The Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative is basically, it's a market-based strategy, right? It's a cap and trade stuff and all this. Again, there's real limits, right, in terms of what that will do, but it will be a significant step forward, right, in getting kind of regional commitments. And now with additional attacks on any kind of action on climate change, I think this coalition of organizations is sensing some waffling on the part of Shapiro. We want to make sure they're going to shore up his commitments. And Temple University's president Jason Wingard steps down after an authorization of no confidence vote by the Temple's faculty union, a strike by graduate students, which we talked about, and the murder of Temple University Police Sergeant Christopher Fitzgerald. Yes, he's only there for 2 years, and now he is out. And of course, the big news today. Yes, the Dungeons & Dragons movie, Honor Among Thieves, hits the big screen today. That's right, today. Yes, indeed. I'm very, very excited about this. Love to hear if anybody else is planning on doing this. And look, I'm going to say this again. I periodically say to people on my podcast, I say to people on social media, look, I would love to do like a kind of a Raging Chicken kind of like led or inspired or connected D&D campaign. I think it'd be so freaking awesome. I'm running a campaign with my brother-in-law, my kids, and my niece, right? And I would love to kind of expand that. But it's always tricky getting everybody together and all this kind of stuff. But we could do an online one, or for example, if you're if say you as an adult play, but you have kids who play, or maybe you don't play but your kid plays, and want to be totally kid-friendly, totally kind of just kind of joyful, totally within the realm of progressive politics, right? That's one of the things that I could bring to the table, right? It's great. I got some great ideas from like some little kind of short campaigns. So you can always hit me up. Go to ragingchickenpress@gmail.com and let me know if you're at all interested. I'd love to hear from you. Anyway, for more PA Progressive Talk, tune into the Rick Smith Show's live stream, 9 p.m. Eastern, wherever you get your streams, and subscribe to his podcast, wherever you get your podcast. Head on over to ricksmithshow.com for the latest across all his platforms. And please check out the Sisters of the Night Caucus podcast. The amazing PA women stirring the political cauldron behind this podcast rock the house. And they know where the bodies are buried. Make sure to follow them on Twitter at The Night Caucus. That's at The Night Caucus on Twitter. And subscribe to their podcast on Anchor, Spotify, iTunes, or wherever you get your podcast. I got an email. I should just say this. I got an email from a listener who was asking me just a little bit more about Sisters of the Night Caucus podcast and kind of like what distinguishes that kind of stuff. And say, this is what I'll say. When I say that, the amazing PA women stirring the political cauldron behind this podcast rock the house and know where the bodies are buried. These are the women that kind of run this podcast, right? Are kind of like insider advocates, if you will. And I don't mean to say like, they're like, insiders in the sense that they're just like, oh, we're going to do whatever the Democrats say. No. These are women who are fighting the good fight, fighting it hard, and at the level of kind of like the county level, like the regional level, right? Also in terms of state legislation and so on like this. So if you listen to their show, you're going to get folks like, you're going to get more politicians on here. You're going to talk to kind of different advocates and what kind of work kind of, in Harrisburg, lobbying for legislation, who are running for office in kind of smaller locations that do not get the coverage from the major media networks. That's the kind of stuff you're going to find in Sisters of the Night Caucus podcast. And they're fun, right? On top of it all, they're fun, right? It's awesome. So do check them out. And if you haven't heard, The Signal is a new podcast by the Bucks County Beacon. The Signal is hosted by the Beacon's editor-in-chief, Cyril Michaleko, and produced by yours truly. Twice a month, Cyril will shine a light on the right-wing extremist currents streaming through Bucks County and beyond. And Cyril invites guests to provide insight, analysis, and organizing solutions so we can steer the community toward calmer, saner, progressive roots. You can check out their podcast directly. Go to buckscountybeacon.podbean.com or wherever you get your podcast, just search for The Signal and Bucks County Beacon, and it'll take you there. And I'll promise you this, we've got 2 shows coming up that are freaking awesome. I'm not going to spill the beans on them now, but the next 2 shows are going to freaking rock. I am so absolutely thrilled for it. Attention all you gamers out there, The Game-In, that's with 2 N's. The Game-In is a Quakertown-based black family-owned gaming store. They're friends of the show, and they've got everything from retro N64s, the latest consoles, video games for all platforms, loads of collectibles, action figures, Funko Pops, walls of Funko Pops, and kids get discounts when they get A's on the report cards. How do you beat that? Check them out on their Facebook page. Follow them on Twitter at The Game-In. That's with 2 N's. You got a question about a game, look for something hard to get, shoot them a message or drop them an email at thegameinpa@gmail.com. And a special shout out goes to Jonathan Mann, who wrote our intro song, There Are No People in the Future. Check out all his great stuff on his YouTube page and follow him on Twitter at @SongADayman. That's at @SongADayman on Twitter, and that's again with 2 N's. And this next Monday, that would be what? Oh my God, we're already in April. Yeah, April 3rd. Monday, April 3rd at 7 p.m., I welcome Karen Faradin back to the show. Karen, of course, is the founder of Burke's Gas Truth, and has been one of the kind of founding members of the climate convergence of PA, and long kind of time activist when it comes to climate issues. Given everything that's in the news around climate, given the fact that we've really got to step up our efforts here in Pennsylvania to ensure that we meet the goals to get net zero by 2050. Karen's going to be on talking about all that and more Monday, April 3rd at 7 p.m. Yeah, so look, everybody, if you want a progressive future, we need progressive media. Support Pull No Punches, homegrown progressive media today. Become a patron for Raging Chicken for as little as $5 a month. Simply go to patreon.com/rcpress. We're here for the fight, but we need you. Become a patron for the price of a good beer once a month. Help keep the media in the movement in the media. Become a patron for as little as $5 a month. Head on over to patreon.com/rcpress today. Look at that. I thought I was going to stay within my intro music time, but I didn't again. So the question is, do I become more disciplined and make sure that I'm just reading things and not commenting on them, so I stay within that? Or do I just kind of, expand the music a little bit to accommodate my blather-worthiness, or whatever it might be? We shall see. It's been quite a week once again. I mean, the big news, of course, is that, Donald Trump was indicted yesterday. He's expected to be kind of make an appearance in court sometime next week. I'm very, very cautious about saying what is going to happen when, in part because most of the information that's out there is sheer conjecture, right? People kind of guessing about what he might be charged with, what that could be charged with, and all that kind of stuff. The only thing that we know for sure, right, is that the grand jury sent an indictment, and it has to do with the hush money payments made to Stromy Daniels to shut her up ahead of the 2016 election, right? That's what we know. What we suspect is going on is that it's not just like paying somebody money to get them to shut up by itself is not a crime. Okay? We should just be clear about that. Matter of fact, the fact that, you think about like this, you have confidentiality agreements or NDIs, right? All this kind of NDAs, right? Those kind of agreements, as messed up as those things are. But all that kind of stuff, those things kind of exist. So the issue is not that he gave money, right, to an adult film star, right, to kind of not disclose, that they had an affair, so that his wife wouldn't get hurt. Why not just not have the affair? Right, especially when your wife is just about to give birth to your son, but that's a whole other thing. But the issue is where the money came from, right, and what was the purpose of the hush money stuff, right? So the idea is that it has connection directly to it was campaign funds that were used to do this, right? And since it was connected to campaign funds, right, since it was connected to his run for president, that this basically amounted to a donation, a potentially illegal donation to the campaign, and a bunch of other things. So there's a potential misdemeanor charge, which has to do with the same things that Michael Cohen was charged to and convicted of and spent time in prison for. And then there's the question of, well, if there's also, it's shown there's a violation of federal election law, then that would be a felony, right? So we shall see, but we don't really know. And we hear all these dates. Next Tuesday he'll be in court. Yeah, we've heard this story before. So we're gonna let this stuff play out. We're gonna see that kind of indictment comes down. It's a little bit striking to me about how breathlessly mainstream media is reporting on the historic nature of this. Never before has a U.S. president been, right. And I guess I'm tired of the word unprecedented when it comes to Donald Trump, but more so, I just have an issue with the fact that one, we're somehow reaffirming that Donald Trump is an aberration, right, in American history. Because by saying that never before has a former U.S. president been charged with crime. Okay, that's a true statement, right? But that is like not unusual in other countries, right? The fact of the matter is that we've had presidents behaving badly lots of times throughout our history. What separates us from other developed democracies, right, is the fact we've chosen not to hold those people accountable for some kind of mythos about the untouchability of the king, right? So, and again, look, I understand you never want to use the courts, right, to kind of go after political opponents for the purposes of winning elections, right? That's a problem. Like, I don't care who it is, that's a problem, right? But that's not what this is about, right? This is about something else. So if a president, or former president, commits crimes, they should be held accountable. I don't see why this is a big controversial thing that is getting blowing up all over the media, right? I mean, it's like, okay, yeah, let's mark it as historical. I was listening to the Chris Hayes show, listening to it because I was listening to the podcast thing, and I had to shut it off halfway through for a couple of reasons. One, it's just I just can't. But one, they interview Chris Hayes interviews. I'm not going to know her name, but she was a correspondent for NBC has been covering the Trump trial. And I'm walking my dog, listening to this on my podcast, and what she's talking about is like, just imagine, Chris, just imagine the visuals around this. I mean, we're a TV network. Imagine the visuals of Trump kind of like having to be maybe even handcuffed and put into a car. I'm like, this is what news is to you? You're looking for ways of kind of creating great visuals so that you can get good ratings. I mean, this is right back to the problem that was there in 2016, right? Looking to capitalize on this for the purpose of getting viewers, right? And it's not exactly what she said, but that's what you're saying. You're talking about the spectacle as opposed to the content, right? So that's one. The second one is Ari Melber, right? He was also interviewed. And you know what, again, it's like this language of about, he kept on wanting to say, well, oh, Trump is nervous now, or Trump he's got to realize the seriousness of it. Now he's scrambling and all this. He doesn't know that. Like all this reporting and pontificating about what Trump is truly feeling, and now he's finally realizing the problem. This is all made up stuff. This is people projecting onto Trump what they want him to feel, not what he actually feels. There is no reason whatsoever to believe, for example, that Trump is panicked right now. As a matter of fact, I was going to talk about this a little bit later, but I'll talk about it now because it's directly connected to what I was just saying. I just got finished reading this book called Freedom's Dominion, right? Let me bring it up because I was going to bring it up a little bit later. So it's a book by Jefferson Cowie. All right, he is a historian. I want to say he's at like Princeton or Yale or something like this. But he is, he's at Vanderbilt, right? He is the James Stallman Chair in American History at Vanderbilt University. And this book is called Freedom's Dominion. Freedom's Dominion, the saga of white resistance to federal power. Right, and it basically is a focused history around Barber County in Alabama, right? And the focus is there in part because there were some interesting things. One, George Wallace, right, who was the, I guess, kind of model of the Southern racist strategy, right? The kind of arguing for segregation that famously said segregation now, segregation today, or segregation now, segregation tomorrow, segregation forever as part of his campaign for statewide office in Barber County in Alabama. And what Cowie argues in this, right, is basically that what George Wallace kind of figured out and finally kind of brought together in a really concentrated way, has long roots to it. And it has long roots to a very conflicted relationship, or I should say, a very contradictory sets of meanings around the word freedom in the history of this country, right? And so on the one hand, there's that notion of freedom, which is about supporting of individual rights, the freedom of the press, right? the freedom to be secure in one's home, all these things that we cherish, like for the, in the Bill of Rights, for example, or the concept like expansion of the democratic franchise to more and more people, this kind of idea about inclusion and all this stuff. And that's freedom for everybody, right? Under the law, right? That we're all blind justice, all that kind of stuff, right? What Cowie shows is that, well, at the same time that there's been that version of freedom, that how we think about this, there's also been a version of freedom that is white freedom, right? Ta-Nehisi Coates also talks about this, right? But what he talks about is kind of white freedom, and that white freedom is basically the freedom to dominate, right? That I am free to the degree that I can dominate others, right? That's the domination. That's the freedom of libertarians, for example. I don't want the government in here to telling me what to do because I want to be able to exploit whoever the hell I want to exploit in the terms that I want, right? It is my freedom to employ children if I want. And if the children chose to kind of, become an employee, that's their choice. Freedom, right? But I get to set the terms of that. The freedom to pay what I think is worth, not what some sort of government bureaucracy tell me what's a minimum wage, right? That kind of freedom, right? And one of the things that's really important, I think, is that and this is not just George Wallace, but this is all demagogues, right? Don't necessarily have a problem with the government, right, charging them with crimes. And what George Wallace did, like, famously, and was documented so well in this book, is that he basically sought out opportunities for confrontations with the federal government, an argument for states' rights and white freedom. Right, so he famously said, "If the federal government tries to integrate our schools, I will stand on the steps of the University of Tallahassee or whatever, and stand in their way." And he did. Right, he eventually he was asked to leave, and he eventually did. But he had his moment. Right, use that as an opportunity to bolster his own and shore up his base. Right, and bolster his own argument that the federal government is about tyranny, right? And why this is important in Cowie's telling of it is because it's the tyranny, right, that they're calling tyranny, the only time that voting rights were ever secured, that black people in the South ever had the measure of freedom equal to that of rights, was when the federal government sent in, whether troops or activated National Guard or all this, to ensure that everybody had the right to vote. The minute that the federal government, the minute they started kind of pulling away, right, is like when people's rights went out the window. This was true during the clearing of the Creek lands, as Cowie documents, with Jackson, right, President Jackson. I mean, before when Jackson was, before Jackson became president, right, in his history, and it's been true in throughout Reconstruction, right, and it's also true in civil rights. It's the same thing. It's the same logic. And I kept on thinking, so I'm finishing up this book, Freedom's Dominion, and seeing what George Wallace did. We always look for these opportunities to kind of demonstrate that the federal government is tyrannical, right? And again, these people, they don't. It doesn't matter whether it's true or whether it's not. Right, it's about constructing the drama, right, to support this deeply embedded notion of white freedom and white supremacy, right, and the ability to have freedom to dominate, power over, as a mark of freedom. And it was really clarifying for me because it's I'm looking for the words to try to understand those two things existing at the same time, and to understand that it's not just this individual or that individual being a hypocrite. This is deeply embedded in American culture, right? It's not about the individual. And this is an important, we had Patricia Roberts Miller on the show talking about demagoguery and democracy not too long ago. And in her thing is where she said, look, I'm interested in demagogues, right? Individuals, but in demagoguery, right? The culture, right? What enables it? What are the patterns of it? How does it operate and how does it work? Right? And making the point that the demagogue can never emerge unless there's a demagogic culture, right? Or it's embedded or those strains are here. Right? So the point is that why is it these people going on TV assuming that now Trump is feeling bad and now he's scared? Why are they assuming that? On what basis they are making those assumptions? It's because what they think, not because what Trump thinks. If I'm Trump and I'm looking at Trump's the practices, his historical practices, he's going to use his arrest and he's going to use this spectacle. Like if I was him in his freaking messed up brain, right? There was a question. Well, he might be afforded the dignity of not having to be in handcuffs or something like this. I don't know. I bet you he and his people are sitting there being like, you know what? That might be a good look. You want to talk about the tyranny and how Joe Biden's tyrannical federal government is coming after you? Maybe you should, let them cuff you and put you back and be yelling as they're trying to stuff you into the back of the car like, this is an outrage. This is, everything he's doing, right? There's no reason to believe that this is somehow going to cause Trump personal pain or something like this. I mean, so I just understand that kind of analysis I find so freaking horrible. And forgetful of what we've just been through over the past decade, right? So whatever. So that's going to happen. And if you want any more proof about this, this is why I put these two stories next to one another, because last Saturday, I believe, right? Last Saturday, he had a rally, his first official campaign rally. He's got his presidential thing out there. And yes, I will grant you that, yes, he probably launched his campaign this early in part because he's trying to kind of mingle this stuff up with, with his political campaign, making the argument that, yes, all that is true, right? But what was more telling for me is not just that he did that for legal reasons. He went to Waco, right? Waco is this iconic moment for white supremacists and militias in this country, right? Let's not forget is that Timothy McVeigh bombed the Oklahoma City building, right, on the anniversary of the killings of Waco, the raid of Waco, right? And in the name of that, in the name of, fill in the blank, a tyrannical federal government, right? I mean, this is, again, long kind of history of this. And if you read folks who study kind of right-wing militias or right-wing extremism and this kind of stuff, Waco is kind of part of the discourse, right? It's written, if you had a Bible that was specifically of the kinds of things and the events and the discourses and the happenings and the histories that were, here's the things you need to learn to be a white supremacist in this country, and here's the thing you need to be committed to. Waco is one of these things. Waco is your launching point for a whole attack against kind of the federal government, whole attacks against black people, right down the road, right? The NRA knew this a long time ago, which is where they would kind of fan the flames of extremism anytime, there's another mass shooting, right? And they would kind of remember Waco, all this kind of stuff, right? So he goes to Waco, right? And they say, I didn't realize this, blah, 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 whatever. Right? That's bullshit, right? They knew exactly what they were doing. And there's a similarity here, right? This was the choice, a similar choice was made by Ronald Reagan, right? When he was running for president, his launch of his campaign speech was from Philadelphia, Mississippi, right? Why is that important, right? Well, sorry, I just got a notification. That is the place where some Freedom Summer activists, right, trying to kind of get people to register for vote, were murdered, right? And they were murdered, right? And again, this was at a time when there was a strong call for states' rights. Yes, indeed, states' rights. right? It was the same kind of argument that we've seen throughout the history of kind of white supremacy in this country, right? States' rights, right? States' rights, you got to keep the federal government out, all this kind of stuff. Now they're trying to force us to recognize kind of black Americans as equal. And, our freedom is about being able to have white freedom and be able to have our representatives, not theirs, that kind of thing, right? So that's where those activists were murdered. And Reagan, right? Obviously, Reagan's was a much better kind of overall communicator than Trump. I mean, he's not as kind of rambling and all this stuff. Reagan went there very purposefully to Philadelphia, Mississippi, to launch his campaign and use the language of states' rights. He didn't make overtly racist arguments like Donald Trump does today, right? Because we're in a different historical moment now. But he basically piggybacked on that and let everybody know, everybody know in Philadelphia, Mississippi, that he was on their side. And because of how kind of ingrained that moment was then, right, he didn't need to say what that meant. All those folks that he wanted to reach out to, all those kind of right-wing folks, all those people still kind of flying the Confederate flag, knew exactly why he was there and what he was doing. Here, Trump goes to Waco, right? Another moment of violence, right? But here, right, that moment of intense violence, and again, it was horrific, right? Nearly 80 people were killed, right, by federal troops. I mean, that's horrific, right? This was like a well-armed militia. There's all sorts of stuff if you go read about it, right? There's all sorts of problems with it right across the board, right? But that moment of violence, right, when the federal government is seen as killing these people, right, because things caught on fire and people died in the flames. It was horrific. That is being the rallying call here. At the same time that he said, look, if they indict me, there's going to be problems. There's going to be violence. There's going to be, he used exactly the word violence, but he's basically let everybody know violence is coming. And then he launches the campaign from Waco, reiterating that, kind of, hitting the activation light for all the kind of stormtroopers that are out there. So this is one of these moments. So we'll see. We'll see. Maybe you'll find out that I'm entirely wrong, that Trump will be shaking his shoes, he'll appear in court and piss his pants in his orange jumpsuit and be crying and like begging for mercy on the ground. But, whatever. I'd be happy to be wrong about that. Okay? I don't think that's going to happen. Right? And apparently, I have not seen this yet, but apparently he's lost his mind on his Twitter knockoff Truth Social about the indictment. That's at least what I've heard reported through other social media channels. What it means, lost his mind, I don't know. That's kind of, it's irrelevant. The question is what work is he doing with that? That's what I'm interested in. I'm interested in what work does his discourse do. Right? So anyways, in other news, other horrific news this week, I'm sure people saw this, right? At the beginning of the week, there was a fire in a Mexican immigration detention center, where at least 38 migrants were killed and 27 were injured. It was, that was pretty devastating. And now there's actually, there's been charges filed now against some of the guards that were there, because there's video that has come out since then. You've probably seen some of it. Video that has come out since then, which shows in the midst of the fire, the guards did virtually nothing to kind of help get those people out. They just left them locked up so they could get out here. There's all this kind of all the kind of the TikTok of what happened, right? And they say, who started it, and and what, but there's all that kind of stuff goes on. But as the key thing here is the reason why there's all these migrants, right, in the detention center is because they were seeking asylum in the United States. But if you recall, under Donald Trump, right, it passed the Remain in Mexico legislation, which basically said that those people who are seeking asylum, right, who are refugees, right, are not allowed to enter the United States to claim the asylum. They have to do so from outside the United States. They have to remain in Mexico, and then they'll have their paperwork worked out. Now, like anybody who, like, you know, is worth their salt in immigration law or has been studying immigration for any time was saying at the time, this is just a way of basically furthering really cruel immigration policy. Right? The United States is signed on to like an international charter, right? That basically says we, you know, accept refugees, because a refugee is somebody who is fleeing from devastation, right? Whether it's threats to their lives from politics, whether it's kind of economic collapse, whatever it might be, right? They're claiming refugee status, right? And in order to do that, you actually have to go and step on the land of the country and say, I would like asylum. And then you go through a process, right? What Trump did is basically, no, you got to stay out of Mexico. And also the news came out this week that, well, okay, technically the remain in Mexico policy is going to slowly peter out. But the Biden administration basically is stepping in, is going to reaffirm this kind of remain in Mexico type of policy. Right, and that's one of a couple things just Will Bunch wrote about in his column on this, right? He said, I wonder how much of the American downplaying of this nightmare in Ciudad Juarez is willful ignorance on our part, a refusal to confront our own shameful role in this episode. That's because the reason that refugees are overrunning the Mexican city, some estimates place the number around 20,000. The reason why they're there is that U.S. policy is forcing these migrants to stay south of the American border, which is their actual goal. And a little later on, he says, yes, if you are heartbroken by over these needless deaths of 38 men seeking to breathe our U.S. air, and join me in telling the White House that Americans won't stand for border policies that are dangerous, inhumane, or go against everything we stand for as a nation of immigrants. And it's that same, and that it's the same, whether that president has a D or an R after their name, 100%. That is exactly the issue here. Right? So if you were against what Trump was doing in his immigration policy, right, then you have to be against what the Biden administration is doing. Right? Is that it doesn't matter. Right? Cruelty is cruelty. Inhumanity is inhumanity. Putting people's lives at risk is putting people's lives at risk. Right? And any work that you do to try to justify, right, a cruel immigration policy by Joe Biden because he's a Democrat, you are no longer doing the service of democracy or doing the service of partisan hackery. It doesn't matter if there's pressures from Republicans and blah, blah. Doesn't matter. We don't need to get inside in his political calculations of running for campaign to see that's his deal. Our deal as citizens of a freaking democracy is to not allow this to be done in our name, right? So there you have it. So there we have it. Hey, Emily. Hey, Nick. Good morning. Good morning. Joining us this morning. So we're going to keep on finding it. That was just devastating to see the number of people that were killed. Well, whatever. Here's another example of what it means to actually you do things that are right because they're right, not because they have a D and R next to the name. According to a new report from the Kaiser Family Foundation, up to 15 million people are now at risk of losing their health insurance as COVID-era rules that expand Medicaid and CHIP benefits are rolled back. Right? You see, basically what the deal is, right? Is that when people lost their jobs during COVID, right? They basically passed this legislation that would basically allow them to kind of get on Medicaid. And then even if they went back to work, right? Even if they started earning more than they qualify. I mean, first of all, can we just say that the fact that for some people in this country, the only way that you can actually get health insurance is by being poor. I mean, just think about that for a second. I forget what the exact number is, but it's something like, say, $28,000, something like that. If you earn more than $28,000 a year, you get booted off Medicaid if you had it before. I mean, think about that. $28,000, $25,000, something like this. I mean, how inhuman are we? Here it is. Oh, no. It's even worse than I thought. Here it is. This is from NBC News. Medicaid eligibility varies by state, but generally people can qualify if their income falls below a certain threshold. In New York, this is the example they're using, so this is probably, it's much different in kind of other states. In New York, for example, a single individual whose income falls under $19,392. So you have to make less than $19,392 in order to qualify for Medicaid. That's annually before taxes, right? Or if you're a married couple whose income is below $26,228 annually, you can qualify the program, right? If you go just a little bit above that cutoff, your benefits are cut off. And you have to re-enroll every year to prove that you qualify. This is what we do in this country, right? This is what we do. The cost of being poor. If we can't take your money, we're going to take your time and your dignity. Right? So what happened during the pandemic, there was a rule that protected people from losing their Medicaid coverage. Right? So basically it said, okay, look, even if you go above that, that threshold, if you were on it, you get to keep it. And that kept people healthy. Right? The recognition was, oh my God, there's a pandemic, right? And so people need health care. And we live in a country that doesn't provide everybody health care, unlike everybody else. So we're going to do this little thing. And it helped people. Nick writes, yeah, I'm waiting to get kicked off my parents' health care next year. Yep. Emily writes, says, my daughter has to go on to Obamacare by next week, so we've started sending in cash assist with the premiums. I mean, this is what this is what we're all dealing with, right? This is what people have to deal with in this country. And so, and this is, and I know that this will kind of register with Nick. I mean, Nick has worked with, kind of making sure that, kids get free lunches, right? I'm kind of saying that every kid should get a free lunch, right? Basically, so we want to ensure that there's access to food for everybody. Right. And during the pandemic, basically what happened is they were expanded this kind of school lunch programs that basically said, regardless of what income threshold you have, if you want a free lunch, if you want lunch and you can have it. And what that did, as we talked about on this show, multiple occasions, is it took away the stigma. It was a huge stress reliever for both the kids and their parents. But you didn't have to think about this. That if you went up and got a lunch, you could be like, your parent could be a lawyer, or your parent could be struggling to make ends meet. It didn't matter. Because you're there at school to learn, and in order to learn most effectively, you need food. Just let's make that part of school, right? But of course, that were temporary programs. And here in Pennsylvania, we allowed that to kind of be taken away. And I know that, again, kudos to Nick and the folks that he's working with to kind of ensure that, try to expand the fight to kind of, for kind of free lunches in schools, lunches for everybody, and lunches for school kids. Fantastic. But so that, this is kind of what's happening. And it's going to happen this week. And here's the other thing, right? Is this goes back to this states' rights nonsense. Is so that means that depending on where you live, you may or may not get coverage, because states can basically some states have chosen to kind of opt in to the expanded Medicaid coverage under Obamacare, right? But a lot of states are saying no. So in some states, people are going to lose their health insurance if that they had just yesterday. This is going to happen on Monday. They're going to lose their health insurance. right? And other states, they're going to be able to keep it. All dependent on who got elected at the state level. And our lack of ability as a nation to actually provide for anybody. It's crazy. In other happy news, right? A new study in the journal Nature projected deep water currents around Antarctica could slow down by 40% by 2050, right? Given kind of current levels and current plans, right? So they're basically taking, let's look at what's happening in the Antarctica now. Let's look at what's on the books of people's commitments to commitments and practices of getting to net zero in terms of carbon emissions, and let's see what happens. And they're saying basically this kind of like could slow down the currents around Antarctica. This is also happening, right? That's in the southern hemisphere. In the northern hemisphere, this is also happening in the kind of the Atlantic current. You know, basically the reason why that you have places like England, right, and even parts of Greenland and Iceland and things like this, while their climates are somewhat moderated by the fact that, you know, you have this warm water that's coming up from the Gulf of Mexico around the kind of up the kind of east coast of the United States and around, and then it drops down over by England, right? So you have this kind of warm current that's absolutely critical for, and it keeps circulating. So it keeps circulating, right? The warm water then eventually kind of sinks and goes down, and then kind of circulates back around, then comes back up and gets warmed up, right? That's key for migration patterns of marine life. That is critical for circulating the nutrients throughout the ocean and all that kind of stuff. But it's also critical for the climate impacts of everyone that's along those areas. So if that slows down, right, it basically means that stuff stops sinking. Until we're on the current slows down, it means that those nutrients don't get circulated. And it basically will increase the amount of warming. It's pretty messed up. So that's happening. Right? I don't know why I'm laughing at that. That's just like, I mean, this is the horror of my everyday. This is kind of like what goes on in my brain every day. Right? God. And then, like I said here, this just blew my, I was like, really? First grade kids in Waukesha, Wisconsin, they're not going to be allowed to sing Rainbow Land by Miley Cyrus and Dolly Parton because, yes, guess what? New district, new right-wing conservatives on the school board, passed a controversial issues in the classroom policy, which basically says, no, this is controversial. It's controversial because, I guess Miley Cyrus and Dolly Parton think it's, you should accept gay people too. I think that's basically what their objection is. But maybe let's be fair here. Let's talk about some of the pretty radical lyrics that are in that, because, it was pretty sneaky for Miley Cyrus and Dolly Parton to basically introduce these kind of like, communist and kind of like white hating and kind of like, all the worst things you can imagine into this song lyrics. Just listen to this radical kind of, this rage that comes in this song. Here's some of the lyrics from Rainbow Land. Living in a rainbow land, the skies are blue and things are grand. Wouldn't it be nice to live in paradise where we're free to be exactly who we are? Let's all dig down deep inside, brush the judgment and fear aside, make wrong things right and end the fight, 'cause I promise ain't nobody gonna win. Oh, hey, no wonder, right? Now you're thinking about it differently. You were thinking like, oh, here's these right-wing extremists that were gonna doing, suppression and censorship and all this stuff again. No, now you hear, can you believe this? Can you believe this? They're freaking, this is what they're doing. They're kind of like banning first graders to sing a song about, I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I thought these were the kind of values that people just taught their kids, right? In schools you would respect each other and blah, 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 right? Nope. Because, again, this goes back to that freedom thing I was talking about again, right? Because some people's freedom is dependent upon, right, the ability to dominate and suppress and exploit and render invisible LGBTQ folks, anybody who's not like them, right? And because that some kids might be now say, oh, my parents say that I should hate all LGBTQ folks, that I should hate trans people. But this song is saying, maybe we should be accepting of people, right? Oh, and they're going to be accepting of me too. And oh my God. And maybe they might come home and and ask their parents questions like, hey, at school we learned that we should kind of be kind to each other, but you're telling me I should hate people. That seems to cause some problems in my brain. And then you force the parents to justify their hate, right? I mean, that's really what this is all about. It's just pretty freaking nuts. And this is at the first grade level. I mean, it's just unbelievable. Is it unbelievable? No. I gotta stop using that language too. It is not unbelievable. This is precisely the nationwide. This is the playbook, right? There's a reason why Ron DeSantis is doing this stuff in Florida, is going to use that as a platform to potentially run for president. It's a reason why here in Bucks County that we have these kind of policy after policy after policy, which is being pushed by kind of increasingly radical school boards, right? To kind of like censor books and to kind of like prevent, a teacher from hanging a pride flag in there to let students know, hey, you're welcome here too, right? No, right? This is all that kind of stuff that's coordinated together. Nuts. And if you need more proof about like where this stuff goes, well, you saw this horrific mass shooting in Nashville this week at this Christian school, right, in Nashville. And again, we'll learn more of the details about what's going on behind it, all the kind of stuff. We'll learn more of that story because that's how this stuff unfolds. But it was horrific, right? More kids murdered, teachers murdered, school personnel murdered, right? By, guess what? An AR-15 and an AR-15 style pistol, because they had access to assault weapons that were purchased legally, right? Tennessee has some of the kind of the least restrictive gun laws in the country. This individual who committed this apparently had been kind of known to had been struggling with some kind of mental issues, maybe had been seeing a counselor or something like this, right? And in some states that have stronger gun laws, right, if you are kind of seen as kind of like kind of having kind of some kind of mental health crisis or mental health issues, right, that might prevent you from getting access to these weapons. Not in Tennessee, not in increasingly more states around the country, as the story has been told again and again and again. This is why it's so, we'll talk about this next thing, but, Summer Lee steps up, right, and basically says, yeah, I'm getting behind. I'm a brand new representative here in Washington, D.C. I'm going to co-sponsor the assault weapons ban, right, and I'm going to go to the House floor, and I'm going to make the case. I'm not going to hide and pretend and blah, blah, no. I'm going there to do work. I'm going there to be an organizer. I'm going there just like she did at the state level. That's what we need. But what does the right wing do? Right? The right wing just does horrific stuff. They use it as an opportunity, right? Because they are bought and sold to the gun lobby, right? Because they are gonna like, I'm not gonna go metaphor here because it'll just get nasty too quickly. Just some sampling, right? This is from the Huffington Post. It said, so far right, Marjorie Taylor Greene, right after the attack, said, Marjorie Taylor Greene attacked transgender healthcare, asking her congressional Twitter account, quote, how much hormones like testosterone and medications for mental illness was transgender Nashville shooter taking? Right? And then she says, everyone can stop blaming guns now. How is that even a thing? Let's say she's taking a bunch he is taking a bunch of testosterone and medications for mental illness and things like that. That should have prevented her from having that gun. Him from having that gun. Doesn't matter if the person's transgender. It means that they had access to an assault weapon. And the assault weapon was used to kill them. Does that mean that this person would not have tried to kind of create some violent act if they didn't have that gun? No, it doesn't guarantee that. What it means, though, is those kids and those people would be alive. Because you don't have a weapon of war in the hands of somebody who may be mentally unstable, right? Then Marjorie Taylor Greene says, the female Nashville shooter identifies as a man. So should we just blame white men again? Which is one of the most incoherent statements I have. I guess what she's doing there is taking issue with the fact that, oh, in the past, when a kind of like almost all these shooters in the past have been white men, many of whom were kind of like addicted to white supremacist logic, just like Marjorie Taylor Greene. And so we called attention to that fact. But ultimately, it wasn't like that was not what was causing. There was like two issues, right? There's a rise of white supremacy and extremist kind of discourse that's fostering violence. That's that. And there was unlimited access to assault weapons. So what people who have been working for gun control, what people have been working for kind of gun reform, was basically saying, take the weapon of like mass shooting and destruction and kind of death out of the equation. Why? Well, because you've got this or this or this or this, which is kind of fostering violence, and you're giving access for people to carry out their kind of freaking fantasies. Horrific as they are. And then, of course, Donald Trump Jr., that freaking like idiot of a human being, comes out and he says, rather than talking about guns, we should be talking about lunatics pushing their gender-affirming bullshit on our kids. Guess what? To use his language, the gender-affirming bullshit is not the thing that killed those people at that school. It was the gun, idiot. So that's what we say. That's the trajectory, right? This is the pattern, right? And yet still they do this. The thing that, like, if it was just some kind of innocuous, they said they want everybody to hate potato chips, blame the potato chips instead, hate potato chips, ban potato chips and all that kind of stuff, it would still suck for people who love potato chips, right? But you're not inviting or providing an excuse for people to go assault trans people, to basically have a justification to carry out violence on other people, which is what these people do. Gender-affirming care didn't kill those kids. The guns killed those kids. The laws that allowed access for virtually anybody to assault weapons, weapons of war, weapons of mass murder, that's what killed everybody in there. Anyways, we got a good show still ahead here. I'm going to take a quick break. I'm going to come back. I'm going to talk a little about what's happening here in Pennsylvania, and then we'll close out with a little fanboy stuff on the new Dungeons and Dragons movie, which I'm looking forward to seeing. Yes and yes. All right, so this is Kevin Mahoney, creator and founder of Raging Chicken. I want to remind you that you can help support the show becoming a patron by going to patreon.com/rcpress. You can help the show right now if you're on our YouTube channel, if you're not there already. If you're on our YouTube channel or you listen to this podcast, share it out to folks, right? Make sure you like the stream. Make sure you subscribe. Make sure that you kind of put in your comments. Let everybody know what you like about the show. That is what you can do to help other people find this, right? And that is really kind of like, the kind of the meat and potatoes, as it were, of the work that we do here. So thank you, everybody. Head on over to patreon.com/rcpress. Become a patron today. We'll be right back after this quick break.
Where are my people? Where are my people?
Everybody, we're back. Oh, one thing I forgot to kind of mention earlier, I always think about that as I'm going, is that I want to apologize for folks who have been watching our YouTube stream for a bit for the past couple weeks. It's really interesting. So one of the things, I think I mentioned this a few weeks back, I did some upgrades in our studio. So I've got this pretty awesome kind of like single piece of equipment now for the podcasting. It's called the Rode Podcaster Pro. It's freaking awesome. It's just it's going to enable us to do a whole bunch of other stuff too as well. But I'll get to that another time. in making that transition away from this kind of really, like duct tape hacked together studio system that I had before then, there's been just kind of some inconsistencies on our sound. And I think I have it figured out today. I think I finally figured out what was the reason why, say, all my levels look right here, except when we're broadcasting or we're streaming to our YouTube channel, like say I'm interviewing somebody and their voice is perfectly fine, but my voice is low, or the other way around. Luckily, in most cases, I believe it's been my voice has been the one that's been low, not the person I'm interviewing. But I think I got that figured out. It had to do with, I'm pretty sure it had to do with the volume output level on my computer. So even though I was controlling volume output from the mixer, right? My computer apparently has some sort of influence over there, and it's really weird because if I were to take the tracks directly recorded to the mixer, right, or if I were to take the track, if I record separately, that wouldn't happen. But something about it going to our streaming software, which is OBS, we use OBS for streaming software. Something in there was causing an issue. So hopefully this is going to fix things, and hopefully we're not going to run into that really discrepancy. But if you listen to the podcast, you don't even know what the hell I'm talking about, because in the podcast I'm able to take tracks and kind of making sure that they're all at the same level. Although I will say on this last podcast, one of the things I thought I had fixed it in the last podcast, but it turns out that my levels were too high at that point. So even though it didn't sound like that on the stream, it certainly sounded like that on the podcast, where you could tell it was clipping some of the high end, that the levels were spiking a little too much. But so I apologize for those inconsistencies, and I appreciate your patience as we kind of work our way towards I don't know, whatever, podcast perfection, whatever you want to call it. I don't know. So there we go. So anyways, here in Pennsylvania, this is, look, there's a reason why that we started working with Level Field to basically launch a community-rooted PAC to have at least a little, small as it will be, impact on school board races here in Bucks County. Had everything to do with what Paul Martino, right, that kind of, multi-million-dollar Paul Martino did during the last school board election campaign, right, through his back to school PAC, basically kind of dumped probably over $500,000 in Pennsylvania school board races. He was dropping $10,000 a pop behind slates of candidates that promised basically not to enforce COVID restrictions. And that's what they did. And in that process, of course, those people who were arguing against COVID restrictions or masking or all that were also the people that were kind of like, tapped into and kind of like, piped into the conspiracy theories around COVID. They were QAnon people. They were there. And Martino basically claims that, we didn't know that. We just kind of, we just was one issue, whatever, right? But they dumped money behind that, got a bunch of QAnon people or QAnon adjacent people elected to school boards, and helped kind of create really hostile and kind of like horrific conditions in our school boards, right? Where we saw them launch, the anti-CRT stuff. We saw them launch the anti-LGBTQ stuff, right? And he's all in on all of this stuff, right? So his back to school board PAC, you remember he was interviewed in the New York Times as a 2-part series of The Daily, which is the New York Times daily podcast, and The Daily, and it was like part 1 and part 2 of the school board wars. And part 2, they interviewed Martino, and Martino was very cagey about it at the time, but basically said, now that I've built this thing, now I'm going to see what I can do with it, right? Well, apparently it's clear what they're going to do with it. So I'm really happy to see Maddie Hanna from the Philadelphia Inquirer started digging in on this and trying to get out ahead of it. Now, Martino, if you recall, he just founded a new sports bar near Rittenhouse Square called Bankroll Sports Bar, appropriately titled, right? So, he's just dumping some money into there. But his wife, right, is Arati Martino. She's a Google engineer, and she's going to be running now as a Republican for a seat on the board in Central Bucks County, right? So, money is going to be flowing nonstop there, and, she's basically going to have an unlimited budget, right? Because you're allowed to spend your own money, right? And technically, her own money is also, she and her husband are spending. I assume that's going to be, part in their bank account. So whatever. But she reached out to, or Maddie Hanna reached out to her to talk about. She wouldn't talk. Martino wouldn't talk. But we know a few things, right? So this this new PAC, or this kind of expanded PAC, is now saying that on their website now that it says this, it's got a broader focus, right? It is not strictly just about, hey, we want to make sure our schools stay open, blah, 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 like they tried it before. No, now it is explicitly partisan, right? And it's called the Back to School USA PAC, and this is what it says on their website. It says, we are going to be, quote, taking the fight directly to the liberal teachers unions and special interest groups that are responsible for indoctrinating our children. There you go. So they are going a whole hog in on continuing to fan the flame on these extremism that has been happening in our school boards, right? The head of the this PAC, right, the point is Clarice Schillinger, right? So if you remember, she previously worked for the Back to School PA PAC, right? And she ran in the Republican primary for lieutenant governor. She's now their executive director, right? And she was a person like to the right of Martino, or right of Mastriano, right? So she was like extremist from the get-go there, right? Now Schillinger did kind of respond in part for this. So she said, quote, told Maddie Hanna, said, quote, the PAC plans to invest in the races across the United States where the public school unions are backing candidates. The system is set within our democracy, should not be owned by one side or the other, she says, right? Should be determined by the support we get from concerned citizens across the country, right? All the blah, 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 blah stuff that you can say. Here's another piece of information, right? From the article again, quote, records show that the PAC, which was registered as a federal super PAC in June 2022, took in $58,000 last year, including $25,000 from Jeffrey Yass, the mainline billionaire investor and school choice proponent, anti-public school guy, in other words. In 2021, Back to School PA received $145,000 from PACs that received significant funding from Yass. So this is another place for the richest man in Pennsylvania to dump more money, right? And I'm sure Martino absolutely knows this. So the fact that they took in $58,000 last year, in a year that wasn't really super highly charged, that means that the money is going to be going in there heavily, right, as we move closer and closer to 2024. And my guess is that we're going to see that kind of activated in this kind of municipal elections, school board elections happening this year, right? So now the PAC is now donating money to other school board races and other places across the country. The other piece of interesting information from this, I said this at the top of the show too as well, but Back to School USA PAC it's planning to host a fundraiser on April 7th. And where were they going to do it? You got it, Mar-a-Lago, right? So that tells you where it's aligned, right? And it was going to be held with Project Veritas founder James O'Keefe, who was removed from the leader of the right-wing group that secretly films people to expose liberal bias. So remember, he's one of the people that was behind the sinking of Acorn, right, which got out, basically helped getting people, kind of low-income people, registered to vote, right? He made up this huge story, made up this whole thing, kind of selectively edited this kind of behind-the-scenes kind of reporting, right? And it was all fine. Again, everything he produces, it gets this big firestorm. Oh my God, here you go, proves that we were saying these people are blah 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 blah, right? These people are horrible. These people are lying to us. These people are trying to do this. And it turns out it's all selectively edited, and it comes out later. He's brought up on charges because it turns out that he's just been lying about stuff and misinformed people. But ultimately, Acorn as an organization was destroyed. And he's done this with other organizations too as well. At the invite to the event, at the invite to the event, it said, quote, that the raising of funds will be aimed at flipping woke school boards nationwide. And it listed a host committee that included former Mississippi Governor Phil Bryant, U.S. Representatives Mark Alford of Missouri, Dale Strong of Alabama, Sheriff Mark Lamb of Arizona, right? So it tells you a little bit what this. Now, again, because of what's happening with Trump right now, Martino did kind of post the PAC's website, or the event was just removed from the PAC's website, I should say, over the weekend. because, Martino is saying that all events at Mar-a-Lago were postponed recently, but the PAX experts will hold the event in the future. So it's not going to happen on April 7th, apparently, as it originally planned, right? Because of, the Trump indictment and all that stuff. So here we are. I do kind of strongly recommend that you do check this out because it tells you a lot about what Martino is going after. It talks about, he's coming out going all in on this anti-LGBTQ stuff, calling it porn. He's basically going out and kind of mocking kind of transgender folks. And it's all done within this kind of language of nicety about like, oh, we're just trying to protect our kids, which again, right. We've had Alyssa Bowen on the show multiple times. We showed like what the history of that discourse is and why that discourse is the marker of this kind of national kind of well-funded agenda by the far right. Right. So there you go. So buckle up, everybody. Martino is definitely going to be all in here. He's right here in Bucks County. He's going to have direct influence on our school board elections and in the 2024 election. So if we weren't already prepared to kind of go toe to toe, we got to do it now. Anyways, down in D.C., newly elected Representative Summer Lee wasted no time getting her voice heard. Yep, she was a co-sponsor of the assault weapons ban in 2023 or for 2023, and she took to the House floor this week and just tore it up. Right, pulling no punches, basically calling out Republicans, urging them to vote for this stuff. Right, and that happened at the time when I don't know about you, but if you have kids, if you're listening, you have kids who are in school, you may have gotten a notification from your superintendent or a school board or something like this about threats of violence to your school this weekend. And why is that? Well, that has to do in part because this past weekend, there were, for example, two schools in Pittsburgh, two Pittsburgh high schools. They were locked down for active shooter threats, and which turned out to be part of a larger hoax. The same thing happened at University of Pittsburgh, right? And as part of this larger hoax, it was taking place across the state, right? And what I thought was interesting here too as well, to give you some sense of maybe who might be behind this, Central Catholic, right, and the Oakland Catholic high schools in Pittsburgh were two of the ones that were targeted, that received calls with that were threatening that there was or saying that there was somebody in the school with a gun, right? So my guess, if I had to put my money behind like who's behind all this stuff, probably those folks who are basically want to capitalize on the shooting, right-wing folks who want to capitalize on the shooting in Nashville by like saying that, oh my God, these mass shooters are now coming for Christian schools, right? To make sure they shore up that base. That'd be my guess, but whatever. I mean, I this is conjecture on my part. But basically, Summer Lee basically went right to the floor, basically making it clear, told House of Representatives, imploring Republicans to stop putting their politics before children's lives, right? And she talked about kind of imagine what it would be like she says, like, imagine you're a teacher hysterically crying to the dispatcher a minute after you heard the news. You realize the lock on your door is broken. You start building barricades with desks and chairs. You ask your students to protect themselves with whatever means possible, from the metal rod in the closet to the acid chemicals in the physics lab. Imagine you're a parent and you receive that phone call or text. Your heart stops, your world freezes, and your mind starts to race. And she goes on, right? Talk about active shootings, hoaxes, evacuation, chill. This is no way for our kids to live. Absolutely summer. The fact is, look, she did this at the state level too as well, right? When she went to Harrisburg, right? She was like not going there to kind of like go along to get along. She was there to kind of make change. And so I'm so glad that she'll be joining up with the kind of the squad there in D.C. and kind of bringing her voice to the table. So all good on you. This week also, this is going to be, like I said, at the top of the first part of the show. We got major climate stuff that is going on. We need to stop it. We need to stop the emissions. We need to kind of do something if we want to have some kind of livable future. Come on, folks. So this week there was a letter that was sent to Shapiro. Now, Governor Shapiro has said that he is committed to getting to Pennsylvania to net zero emissions by 2050, right? That's nice. right? It might seem like, oh, we got some time left, right? We got, 25, 26, 27 years, right? 26 and a half years to get there. It might seem like it's a lot of time. Everything that we've learned up until now said that is not a lot of time, right? To shift our emphasis, shift our reliance on fossil fuels is not something that is going to happen just overnight. It's going to take time. It needs to happen immediately. And our Republicans in the state house have increasingly been kind of attacking climate policy. And so one of the things they're going after in particular was Pennsylvania's very late and kind of feels like stumbling commitment to join the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, or the RGGI, right? This is, again, it's a market-based thing, kind of you're trading carbon credits, you're doing a cap and trade kind of approach to it, but whatever, it's better than zero, right? Okay, we'll take this. And because of the lack of action at the federal government, it was states around us that decided we need to join together and to tackle it together as a region, right? And Pennsylvania was invited to join that because it's adjacent to New Jersey and to Maryland and to, New York and, all these other states that were part of it. Pennsylvania was reluctant to join, hemming and hawing, blah, 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 but they did. And there must be some sense that that there's going to be pressure on Shapiro to kind of back out of that, right? And we're going to see what Shapiro's real commitments are to climate stuff here. I'm a little bit nervous about his commitments, given the fact he seems to be fairly cozy with some big money. So we shall see. But in that, they said, again, the letter says, as you know, we believe that states' participation in the RGGI is an important component of an overall plan to achieve your goals. RGGI is the most effective single action for Pennsylvania to tackle the climate crisis while improving public health, creating jobs, and providing for clean, reliable, and affordable energy alternatives. It will allow Pennsylvania to secure its energy independence and keep energy costs low for families. Right. It is no secret that Pennsylvania's energy sector is a major contributor to pollution, emitting millions of tons of harmful pollutants annually and causing significant long-term damage to the environment and to the health of Pennsylvanians. In 2021, Pennsylvania's power sector alone emitted nearly 85 million tons of carbon dioxide and thousands of tons of other harmful pollutants. The presence of these pollutants in our air, water, and soil exacerbates the climate crisis and increases risks of illness, respiratory issues, asthma attacks, heart attacks, and premature death, particularly in disadvantaged and frontline communities. There is no lower cost way to reduce emissions than RGGI. RGGI limits carbon emissions through a binding, declining limit on how much power plants can emit, and the numbers show that the initiative improves, even saves lives. A study of RGGI participating states over the 5-year period has shown that RGGI made a positive impact on public health. RGGI improved the air quality and decreased pollution, leading to hundreds of lives saved and thousands more avoiding increased risks for illness. And it goes on. So they are just urging him to stay the course and keep committed to this. So we shall see. So keep your eye on this. This coalition that was kind of put together was pretty amazing, right? There were obviously environmental groups, but there were faith-based organizations, there were business organizations that are all joining together to basically saying, together we need to stop this. And Shapiro, we need you to stay the course and stay on board. All right, so let's hope that happens. Also, we saw big news in Temple, right? The Temple University president, Jason Wingard, has now stepped down. This is going to be interesting to see what the story, how this story develops over time. Because right now, it's just about reporting was stepping down because there had been ongoing complaints about his approach to the university, right? He said, I wanted to make, Temple kind of a shining star, and I want to make Temple, I want to improve its, like, what was the word he used? What did he say? I forget the word he used now. Oh, here it is. Wingard worked to, this is right out of our press release, right? Worked to enhance the value of the university, right? Since joining in 21, that was the kind of like his thing, enhance the value of the university. But what that means, like anybody who's worked in any industry for long enough knows that when somebody starts talking in this kind of vague language and enhance the value of X, Usually what that means is that workers are going to pay the price, right? Because really what they're talking about is brand. They're talking about branding. They're talking about a public relations kind of initiative and all that stuff. Not that that can't have an impact, but usually that's done on the backs of workers. And that is clearly what was going on in Temple. That's why the faculty union was pissed off about it. That's why we had this kind of serious graduate student union strike at Temple, right? Where this guy basically was playing hardball, anti-union tactics, kind of or classic hired kind of anti-union lawyers in order to kind of try to kind of break the strike, all that kind of stuff, right? And then supposedly while he was trying to enhance the value of the university, there was a poll that was done by Temple News, right? Found that 92% of over 1,000 Temple students who participated in a recent poll, right, said they disapproved of his performance. So this was kind of up and down, right? So whatever. People said he had his orientation towards the money, had his orientation towards the corporate connections, his orientation towards that kind of stuff, and not orientation towards making sure that Temple's actual education was as best as possible. Now, someone has been in the state system of higher education. We're familiar with this for a long, long time. That has been the tactic, has been to kind of do PR, build nice buildings, say nice words, while all the time kind of wrecking the workforce. So there it is. But he's going to step down. Now, what sucks about this in some ways, right, is that, well, I understand it sucks, but the fact is, like, the guy was, like, Temple University's first African-American president, right? And it sucks that this had to be the guy who was that, right? Because you know what some people are going to say, so you know what the writer's going to say and all this other kinds of stuff. It's going to foster these kind of, all sorts of shit around this. So I just hope that doesn't happen. But he's gone, and according to faculty, students, staff, graduate students, sayonara. See ya, buddy. See ya. So anyways, I got one last thing for you today. This weekend, the Dungeons & Dragons movie Honors Among Thieves hits the big screen. Yes, indeed. So back in the days, we used to do a segment was called Last Call, where we talk about beer and culture and stuff like this. And now I just kind of tack it on to our second segment, and partly because I'm doing this alone most of the times and so on. But I'm really excited about this. And look, I mean, I would have gone to see this movie regardless because just like a whatever D&D head that I am. But just because I love that, right? But it's actually getting pretty good reviews, right? I mean, I have to say that, it's not like it's I'll just read you just for example, this is on CNN Entertainment. Okay. This is like, I'll just read you the opening couple paragraphs so you get a sense of what people are saying about it. So game on. Exceeding any reasonable expectations, right? Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves turns out to be a whole lot of fun, serving up what amounts to a smart alecky version of Lord of the Rings that doesn't require knowledge of the underlying game. Employing ample special effects wizardry in the service of what's basically a comedy is a bold stroke, but even if it takes a little too long to play, this lighthearted adventure looks like a winner, right? So there you have it. The film stars Chris Pine, Michelle Rodriguez is also in the film. Hugh Grant has a kind of I believe his is more of a minor role, but he's in there too as well. Justice Smith is in there as playing a shape-shifting Doric, right? So it looks like it's going to be it's going to be fun. Reggie Jean Page, right? If you remember him from Bridgerton, right? He's in here. That guy's an awesome actor. So anyways, I'm looking for the fun, right? I'm going to see and hopefully kind of doing a little suspension of the hellscape that faces us if we don't tackle climate change, of the kind of the people that are fostering kind of anti-trans hate and kind of wrecking our schools just for just a short period of time. It's going to go and I'm just going to make good on some D&D hope. The other thing is we were hoping to play this weekend. That was going to be like a whole D&D weekend, but I don't know if the game part is going to happen. So I've got so much stuff to do. So that's how it is. But anyways, I'm going to try to make room for this movie. That's what I've got to say. So love to hear what other people think about it. Again, I'll put out my call. I'm just going to keep on doing this. I'll just say this as a kind of related connection. So on our Patreon site, there was a post I put up a little bit, kind of announcing I should say, the Imperial We, that I am going to start adding in some Patreon content. One of them is going to be called Dungeons and Dragons is Dead, and it's just going to be kind of little kind of D&D talk type stuff. And what I thought I'd do is one of the I guess something I noticed, right, as I was trying to learn how to be a dungeon master, DM or GM for the first time, right, for my kids and other stuff, is like I had played before, I had never DM'd or GM'd. So there I was, trying to figure out how to do this, and so I was doing what most people do, right, watching YouTube videos and like, so what are some suggestions and what are things like this, and I saw some great folks play, and a lot of the people who were putting out those videos, and thank you for all the people who were putting out that content, but they were experienced players, right, giving kind of like recommendations to new players, right, which was super valuable for me. What I just thought I'd do is like, well, what would it look like to kind of just have like a kind of talk along, right? So basically talk about that process of coming to this for the first time as a new GM, talk about how the game and some of the things that are happening in the game, things that I'm learning, right? Things that are interesting, and just to have a little bit of fun with it, right? So that was there. So that post is up there. That is still in the works. I've got but my goal for that, just so everybody knows, if you've been waiting for that content to come out on our Patreon, is that I wanted to get a few sessions kind of under our belts first, and then kind of start kind of like kind of going back and kind of narrating through each one of those sessions as kind of a separate episode. But I wanted to get a sense of where things were going first before I started kind of jumping in. Just because that could make it really kind of erratic, or I would forget from time. So this will allow me to kind of do some reflective and thinking about what we're doing. And I'll tell you, one of the best things about it is anybody who's written content about being a dungeon master, or people who, whatever, it's a podcast or if it's a YouTube channel that kind of gives advice to kind of DMs or new DMs, they'll all say is like the one thing, the best part of the game, right, are the players, right? The best part of the game. So you're basically creating the story in the background and all this stuff, but the best part of the game are the players, and they're going to do things that are completely unexpected, right? That will just kind of like, if you have a strict plan of what you want to do, they will derail those plans, right? So I took that to heart, thank God, right, from when I first started, because I'm like, okay, well, I'm gonna do that, right? I'm just gonna kind of be open to this. I'm not gonna try to plan too specifically ahead. I'm gonna provide, for each session. And sure enough, the very first session that we had, it was like what I thought was going to be this like really kind of like short kind of opening kind of like scene, if you will, changed like the entire party composition, changed the way like what we did, and it just introduced like so much fun and joy and levity and like into the game already. From like that was from episode 1. And then, my kids, my niece, my brother-in-law continue to surprise me, the choices they make each step of the way. It's like being part of a kind of collective and collaborative storytelling effort is so awesome, right? It is really a wonderful experience. So anyways, that's the kind of energy I wanted to bring to that stuff on our Patreon. So so that will be coming up, right? When, I feel like, okay, I've got enough stuff to go forward. I'm probably going to do another video soon talking a little bit about some of the things I'm talking about now. So that'll be coming up. The other thing I'm playing around with a little bit, and we're going to see if I can, if time permits, right? It might be something that I wait until the summer to do this, but I mentioned today on today's show that book, Freedom's Dominion, that I'm reading, right? And I thought it might be just cool to have like a little short segment, right? Not kind of like an entire show, but just kind of say like like reading list or something like this. And that each book that I kind of I finish and that is interesting, right? For some of the projects that we're doing here, or even if it's more fiction too as well. But just to hop on there and kind of like talk a little about those books, make reading recommendations and so on. Talk a little about some of the things I'm planning to read coming up, just as kind of like part of, building part of that community on Patreon. As a reminder too, as well, that Dungeons and Dragons and Dad, the way it'll work is that it's not like, it'll launch first for our patrons, right? So that if you're a patron of the show, it'll first get posted. You'll get to see it first, but then it'll eventually open up to everybody, right? Because I don't want it to be like the kind of thing in order, if you want to jump on that, you have to become a patron. I know everybody doesn't have those capabilities, but I do want to have just a little extra little content there for our patrons. Depending on how all that stuff goes, depending on where things go kind of the next kind of year, what I would love to do is use that as also space to kind of, put together games and things. I'll let you in a little secret. Actually, well, yeah, what the hell? Is that I'll probably, this is one of the things I was talking about, going to do on the Patreon too, as just talking about some ideas batting around. One of the things I thought would be really fun to do, right, is to do kind of like a little kind of summer campy kind of thing, right, where playing Dungeons and Dragons, right, and how I've thought about what you can do in collaborative storytelling, right, especially in a framework like Dungeons and Dragons, is that it allows us to kind of like grapple with kind of issues and problems and things like this in our world as it is, but in this kind of other realm. That's what I've always loved about science fiction and fantasy stuff, is that, it's particularly science fiction where you're kind of taking tendencies and threads that are in our culture as it is and projecting them out. But it's also true of really good fantasy too. It's like you're actually working on and kind of like echoing and working out in different ways some of the issues that are in our present. And I think about that as I'm designing my own world, right? Because this summer I'm going to be launching a smaller campaign, probably with some like smaller things with my crew on the world that I'm creating, right? Which is kind of cool. And so I thought that that would be kind of fun, right, to do if if this works out. So this is why I keep on asking folks, if you know people that are interested in playing, right? If you know people that maybe not be familiar with the game and or are kind of okay players or don't mind working with like a GM who's really new and still learning, I'd love to play, right? I just think it would be a good social moment where we could have fun, engage some kind of cool ideas and kind of issues in a fun manner, and then move on from there. So that's one of the things I'm thinking about. And I've got some ideas of who I'm going to talk to about doing that, because you'd have to do more than one person. The cool thing too is there's a place in East Greenville. It's called the Chibi Cafe. My daughter loves this place. They actually have you can reserve rooms there, right, for like D&D play. So you can actually go and actually sit down. You have access. You get discounts on stuff kind of from there, but you actually play your game kind of in that space. We're probably going to do that at least once this summer, just with my crew, as a way, just kind of like a fun thing to do. So there you have it. Anyways, that's how I'll close it. So that's some of the stuff that's kind of coming up, some of the things that I'm thinking about on the Patreon site. And I again, thanks out to all of our Patreons. And you know what? I don't thank enough, right? Because there's been people who've been supporting the show, and they did it before we ever got on Patreon. There's people who've been supporting the show through our Podbean members, right, who support our podcast through there. There are people who have been members of the show when we just had a PayPal hookup, and they keep on keeping on, and have kind of joined and continue to support the show. So my continued and always thanks goes to all of you for your continued support, and for all those folks who got going to help share the show. I've mentioned this before. There's been weird issues on Twitter. If you talk to anybody who does the kind of work that we do, they're finding the same thing. It's just because of what Elon Musk has done to Twitter, is that what had been part of our pattern of getting our show out and getting other people's eyes on our show, kind of reaching out to new communities and stuff like that, it's not happening in the same even way. And it's only been because the people who are committed to the show, who are listen or watch the show and share the content, that we've been able to kind of maintain our viewership and listenership. As a matter of fact, it's kind of gone up, which has been pretty awesome. But it's been more work, right, to make sure that our stuff is showing up on people's feeds. And And frankly, there's not an easy answer for what to do with that, which is one of the reasons why I'm going to try to build up some stuff over on Patreon, so that there's going to be, we have a little bit more control over making sure that people who are supporting the show, that are interested in the show, get those notifications. So anyway. All right, everybody, this is Kevin Mahoney, creator and founder of Raging Chicken. I want to thank you all for tuning in as usual. Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Emily, for your comments and participation and kind of being here today as we went live. Wishing you a fantastic weekend ahead of you, and let's hope that spring comes, and with it comes like some nice warm weather, some opportunities to get outside and take our communities back. You know what I'm saying? All right, everybody. Have a great weekend. It's Kevin Mahoney, creator and founder. Head on over to patreon.com/rcpress. Become a patron today. Price of good beer once a month. Help support this show and everything that we do. I am psyched this weekend. See ya!